Greetings, Life Management students, and welcome to module number 2. So I hope you're getting the flow of how we work in this course and you've navigated Canvas and you're playing around with it. This week, we're going to start talking about goals, how to set goals, how goals can help us in life. We're also going to talk about decision making, and then we're going to talk about something that I found really fascinating and interesting, and that's social capital. So let's start and get on with our progress here. Okay, so thinking about goals and goal setting, and this is going to help you because remember, the one paper that we write in this class is a goals paper. So we're going to have a little bit of conversation here about how you can start preparing, creating a rough draft for that assignment. All right, so building our critical thinking skills. First of all, understanding that when we engage in critical thinking, what it really means is that we're thoughtful. We're putting effort into considering something, sometimes reflecting on something as we have our weekly reflections. And so think about that. In other words, sometimes somebody might ask you a question and you can answer the question yes or no. But sometimes somebody asks you a question and it kind of stumps you. Or you think about it and you go, wow, I need to really think about that for a minute. Right? And that's critical thinking. It's when we take the time to thoughtfully think about how do I really feel about that, what they're asking me, right? And so critical thinking. Some things that we can think about when we talk about this critical thinking or higher level thinking, when we compare and contrast, when we analyze information, when we evaluate information or deduce information, definitely when we prioritize. So when you make your list of 10 things to do, and you prioritize them. So you can make a list of, these are the 10 things I have to get done tomorrow. But then you go back and you say, out of this list of 10, I need to rank them in order of what is imperative or most important that I get done, right? And that's prioritizing. It's when we determine the importance of task. We make a list and then we determine what order am I going to get them done. And then when we think again about the lower level or maybe non-critical thinking, if you will, those are things that don't take a lot of effort. That's just kind of common information that is not going to require us to reflect or be thoughtful. So again, decision-making and critical thinking, we need to use logic instead of emotion. And this is hard for some of us because some of us are extremely emotional people. That's just who we are, part of our personality. And for those people, we need to always come back to when we make decisions, they have to be based on logic. So what is logic? Well, again, logic is kind of this higher critical thinking, but it's also when we can do a couple different things. And one of them is deductive reasoning. We'll talk about deductive reasoning here. Deductive reasoning means that I can hear a story or an example and I can figure out without someone directly telling me a connection. So let's just say, let's say that I know, general principle is that an unmarried man is a bachelor. That's the definition of an unmarried man, right? So I know that I have this friend, Joe, and Joe has never been married. Therefore, I can deduce that Joe is a bachelor, right? So it's when you take a principle or a thought and you create an example out of that and you figure it out without somebody else cluing in. So let's say, for instance, you have a partner and you notice some things. Like you notice that your partner is distant. You notice that your partner, when you ask them, who they had lunch with, they're really vague about it. You're noticing these clues and you're starting to deduce that maybe there's something going on that you need to be concerned about, right? Right? And so critical thinking is when we use that logic to determine the fact, not the opinion. And we don't really want to think about what is someone's opinion or what are you going on emotionally. We want to think about what is the fact here. That's really logical, deductive reasoning. Right, so decision making again is when we have to make choices. This is something my kids struggle with. I mean, even deciding what they want for dinner is just like, no, mom, you decide. I can't decide, right? Especially making big decisions. I have a son who's a senior and he's graduating. And so he doesn't know what he wants to do. And I don't expect him to. I really think that's one of the misperceptions we have as we develop into adulthood, is that sometimes people think by the time you're 18, you should have it figured out. You should know what you're going to do for the next 60 years. And I think that that is unreasonable. I just think we don't know. And that's okay. It's okay not to know. We're going to help figure that out as we progress, hopefully, through this class. You'll learn more about yourself, which will help you learn more about what you want to do. Right? But that's what I'm talking about, is making these decisions. So understand that it's a privilege to make decisions. Can you imagine what it would be like if we lived in a different era, a different generation, a different time or place, a place and time where we did not have free choice? If we lived during the Holocaust and we were Jewish, we would not have free choice on what we could do in life, let alone if we would live. And so it's a privilege to be able to say, I live in a country that has freedom, that I, as an independent individual, can make decisions all the time. So that's a really important thing to understand. First off, is that it's a privilege to make these decisions. Hence why we should all vote, because it's a privilege to vote, right? So we can make these decisions kind of intuitively or through reasoning. Intuitively is what we think of as your gut. You ever had that? Sometimes you meet someone and there's like this instant connection, or sometimes you meet someone and there's this gut feeling that they're trouble or that you should not hang out with them, right? So that's intuition. It's just kind of this internal sense versus a reasoned, right? Reasoning is when we base it on facts. We base it on concrete information. And sometimes we make decisions with the combination of those two, right? And that's not wrong, but we need to be aware of that. So goals are really outcomes that help you to achieve or guide and sustain your effort over time. So we're going to have short-term goals, right? Short-term goal could be something like, okay, I just need to make dinner tonight. That's my goal. My goal is to get dinner on the table. Then it could be, my goal is to get a rough draft of one of my papers done. My goal is to finish this semester with an A in life management. My goal is to figure out or determine what I will do beyond that. Okay? So we're going to have goals, and goals are guiding our behavior, and goals can be, like I said, at different stages. Short-term goals, intermediate, or long-term goals. We'll talk about that here. And so we're going to talk about the steps that you need to go through to develop these goals. Number one is gather information. Set a SMART goal. Make an action plan. List barriers and then how to overcome those barriers. And then act and evaluate on those outcomes or what happened in your goals. So the first one was this goal setting, is gathering information. And when we say gather information, when you're creating a goal, it should not be my goal. It should not be your parents' goal or anyone else. It should be, excuse me, it should be your goal. It should be about what you want. Pardon me. So I want you to think about making goals, but here's the big thing, is a lot of times people make goals that are a little far out there. So for instance, let's say you're 19 years old and you set a goal that within the next 2 years, you want to buy a Tesla and you want to travel to Europe and you want to be married with 3 kids. Unrealistic, right? Not really going to happen in 2 years. And so we want them, number one, to be realistic. Now, those can be long-term goals. All of those, no problem with having those as future goals, but be realistic about your time frame and make them meaningful. Do you really want a Tesla, or are you saying you want a nice car, or you want a reliable car, or you want to pay off your car? What is meaningful to you? Okay? And so think of reviewing our strengths and weaknesses is a big one. So if I were to set a goal for myself, I would never set a goal for myself that says I'm going to be a ballet dancer, because that would be one of my weaknesses, right? No creative ability. I'm not athletically inclined in any way. And so I know some of my weaknesses. So I want to play to my strengths instead of my weaknesses. And then I want to think of what has been challenging for me in the past, as far as, is it a realistic goal for me to set? And then when your goals really matter to you, when they're important to you, you're going to find that you're much more likely to achieve them. Again, if you had a parent or a guardian or somebody who says to you, I want you to be a doctor. and you think to yourself, I really don't want to be a doctor and I don't want to go to all that college, right? It's going to be challenging because you're setting a goal that's really not meant for you, number one, and you're not going to be motivated to achieve that. So we've talked about this, and you're going to want to remember this because this is part of your paper that you're writing for life management. And that is the length of time to achieve goals. We're going to identify your goals according to a short-term goal, which takes less than a year to accomplish. Okay? An intermediate goal would be 1 to 5 years to accomplish. And then a long-term goal is something that's beyond 5 years. Beyond 5 years. So remember that because we're going to use that when we do your paper. Also, when we write your goals paper for this class, we will kind of take all your goals and break them up into these different 5 categories. Personal goals, educational goals, employment or career goals, financial goals, and then community service or faith-based goals, right? And we'll explain and talk about this as we continue on here. So this is it for your goals paper assignment. You are going to list 50 goals. I know you're thinking, no way am I coming up with 50 goals. You can do it, I promise you. You can have more than 50, but I want a minimum of 50, okay? Goals must use positive language because our words are very powerful. So I want you to say, I will earn an A in life management, and this is how I'm going to do that, right? I don't want you to say something like, I will really try to do good in life management, because that's not positive language. Or I won't drink soda anymore. Not positive language, right? I will drink only water. That's positive language. So our words are powerful, and there's something that happens within us when we speak things out. And so I want you to use positive language for all of your goals. After you write your goal, you must identify what kind of goal it is. Is this a goal that is short-term because you can accomplish it within 1 year? Is it a goal that is IT or intermediate because it's going to take you 1 to 5 years to complete? Or is it an LT, long-term goal, because this goal is beyond 5 years? Your paper will have a cover page. On that cover page should really just be your name, this class, goals paper, and we are in the spring semester 2020. This is life management class. That's all I need on your cover page. Right? There is already an example posted in Canvas for you. So here I am giving you pretty much a roadmap. I'm sharing with you a student who earned an A on their paper. And so if you look under Canvas and you look under paper, there is an example paper. You should look at it because you want to make sure you format your paper like the example paper. Now don't take that person's goals because those goals are not relevant to you. These need to be your own goals you come up with, but the format you should be able to follow. Okay? And then again, as we said, you will break those goals up into these 5 different areas. So here's something to really question about your goals. When you think about your goals, are they written down? So sometimes we have these goals in our head. I want to achieve this, I want to do that. There's something, again, powerful about not just speaking words, but writing them down because it holds you more accountable. Right? Are they your goals, not somebody else's? Right? Do they have a deadline? This is something, as again, students fail to recognize. For instance, I'll have a student that will say something under their personal goals like, I will lose 15 pounds, period. Well, that's not specific enough for this paper. It needs to be more specific in telling me, how will you lose 15 pounds and by when? So you will say something like, by March 1st, I will start running 2 miles a day, 3 times a week. Okay? And by, let's say, August 1st, I will have lost 15 pounds. Now you've set a deadline for yourself. And the reason it's important is because now you're accountable. Because if August 1st comes and goes and you thought, wow, I didn't actually ever run, and I certainly didn't lose 15 pounds, I gained 15, then you weren't really holding yourself accountable for that goal. Okay? What are the costs of the goal and are you willing to pay it? So if your goal is to be a doctor, which I'm a doctor, I have my doctorate degree, I'm not a medical doctor, but the question is, will you pay the cost? And the cost here is not just financial, but I spent a lot of years in school, and I love school. So for me, it was okay because I love school. I love learning. But are you willing to commit that, right? And then there is a financial cost that goes along with your goals, whatever your goals be. What help will you need to accomplish them? Do you need to find a mentor? Do you need to find some resources? Do you need to find a job, right? What do you need? Are you focused on it? Because sometimes we can be a little scattered when we don't really know what we want. Are your goals adaptable? So I tell this to students all the time. I teach in the health sciences department at Delta College. And so some of the courses I teach are attended by most of the nursing students or students who are applying to the nursing program. And one of the things I say to them is our nursing program at Delta College is impacted, meaning that it is very difficult to get into. So I tell students, if you do everything you're supposed to do and you apply and they turn you down, and you apply the next semester and they turn you down again, how can we adapt your goal to be a nurse? Because if we don't adapt it, you can spend the next 5 years being rejected from the nursing program. And that's really not on your way to your goal, right? So maybe we need to start adapting it by thinking of something else, right? Maybe you want to be a respiratory technician, or you could be a physical therapist, right? A speech therapist. We can go on and on about different jobs you can have that are very good jobs, that you can adapt your desire to help patients. Do your goals stretch your limits? All right, so if your goal is to basically stay in a low-level paying job and never advance, okay? Maybe that's not pushing your ability. And so we want you to stretch yourself. Do you believe in your goals? Some people, it's so hard for them to believe that they can do well in life, and I'm sorry for that. I think some of you may be listening to this. Maybe you didn't have people say good things to you when you were growing up. Maybe you never had someone to say, I am proud of you, or I believe you can do this. And those are powerful words. And I feel that for all of my students. And unfortunately, I meet students that don't believe that because they haven't experienced people saying those kind of words to them. And so you need to believe that you can accomplish your goals. And then what did you do today towards that goal? So that helps break it down. So every day, if your goal is to be a doctor or your goal is to be a mechanic, whatever that goal is, what were you doing? Were you in college class to help you in that journey, right? What did you do? All right, so SMART goals. What is a SMART goal? Well, it's an acronym, the word SMART. It means that each letter of the word SMART stands for something, and the S stands for specific. So we talked about this a little bit, right? You want to make your goals really specific. When I grade your paper, I don't want to see things like, I will be a better boyfriend to my girlfriend, because that's not specific. Most of us desire to be better partners, right? And so I want to know specifically, how will you be a better boyfriend to your girlfriend? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. And so be very specific. You would say something like, I will be a better boyfriend to my girlfriend by spending 30 minutes a day on the phone with her. I'm talking about our day, by having a date night twice a week, by reading a book on healthy relationships once a month. And that's a good one people don't think about, but it's important because we can learn, for those of us who weren't taught how to have a healthy relationship, we can learn that. M stands for measurable. Again, making sure that your goal is measurable. So if you say something like, I will make at least 9 out of 10 free throws, that's measurable. I can measure. After I shoot my free throws, I can measure whether or not I did that. A stands for action. So you want to be specific in here. So in other words, you wouldn't want to say something like, in order to make a 93 average in science by October 26, I must study. And in other words, say something like, in order to make that 93 in science, I must read over my science notes every night for 20 minutes. Do you see how that is being specific? And I'm having to do that activity, the action myself. R stands for realistic. Again, maybe make our goals realistic, because as much as I would love to go to Disney World. I would love to go to like Disney World in Tokyo. Probably not happening, maybe in the future, but it's not realistic for me right now. And so making them realistic for you. And then T stands for time. So set specific timelines for you. Don't be unrealistic. Set a timeline. You will achieve this grade. You will have an A average in the class by April 1st, right? And you'll check your grade with your professor to see where you are. Set a timeline. All right, weak goals versus SMART goals. These are, again, just kind of good examples for you to look through when you have some time and you review your slides. Here's an example of, a SMART goal, right? I will complete the first draft of my life management paper, your goals paper, by next Friday. Okay? Specific, a SMART goal is telling me when you're going to do it, what you're going to do, right? And so that's holding you accountable. So that's an example that you might see on the exam. Right, 6 rules for stating goals. So again, I've talked about these a little bit. State them in positive language. I will. That's what I want to hear. I will, I will, I will. Make them specific. I will travel to Japan when I retire. In other words, I can say I will travel to Japan, but that doesn't say when. And I want you to tell me when, right? And so I will travel to Japan when I retire, because that might be when I have the funds to do something like that. Make them measurable. I will save $1,000. So sometimes students will say, I will open a savings account, or I will save money. How much money? By when do you want to save that money? Be specific. Set deadlines. Have a variety of goals. That's why I have these 5 different groups: personal, educational, career, spiritual, financial, because those are all different places in our life that we should have some goals. And then make them your own, and only you know what that looks like. So that step 3 in this creating goals is making an action plan. So list the steps that you'll take to accomplish the goal and the order you need to do it. So start with those long-term goals, and then think backwards and think, in order to get here, if your goal is to make $100,000 a year, you want to be doing pretty well financially. What type of job or education is it gonna take to get to that place? And so you use the short-term goals to get to the long-term, right? Again, setting deadlines for yourself, prioritizing what comes first, and then doing both of those, putting those steps into action. And again, here, you can see an example of putting this into an action plan. So remember, we talked about that one of the steps to goal setting is understanding yourself more and knowing what are the barriers and how will I overcome the barriers, or what are the solutions to those barriers. So barriers basically prevent you from making progress towards your goal. They're walls. There's something that we encounter that trips us up. That's a barrier. And some are under our control and some are not. If you have a goal to finish school or to get a mechanic certificate or anything like that, and then you get cancer, getting cancer is pretty much beyond your control, right? It's not something that you have control of. However, if you are on your road to, getting that education or that certificate or that training or whatever it needs, and you just stop showing up to classes, or you stop showing up to your job, that's up to you. And so that's what we're saying. Some are under your control and some are not. How can we avoid them? Here's a big one that students struggle with. Excuse me, procrastination. We all struggle with this one, right? So procrastination is basically when you wait as long as you can to start something. So when you, like, say right now you're thinking in your head, I can't write. I haven't written a paper in forever. I'm scared of writing. I don't really want to start this goals paper. I don't want to do a draft of the goals paper. And you procrastinate. So the day that it's due, you start your paper at midnight because you've put it off as long as you can. Your paper is going to reflect that. I'm going to look at it and know this is what I call the 2 a.m. paper. You start at midnight, end at 2, and it looks like that. And so avoid procrastination because it will help you to have less stress. So when we procrastinate, we get stressed out because we know we're procrastinating. Visualize those solutions to barriers. Break these barriers down into many steps and then do the hardest part first. When you do that, when you knock that out of the way, then the other part seems like, oh, I'm almost done now. That was the hard part. These are way easier. I love this one. This is rewarding yourself. So when you have these goals and then you want to look at how they happened, right? Evaluate how you're doing on this goal. So if you have a particular, financial goal, so let's say that you want to have good credit and you currently don't have good credit, right? So where are you? Are you checking your credit reports every 6 months to find out what your credit score currently is? What are the things that you've looked at to learn, how can I improve my credit score, right? Evaluate that progress and reward yourself. Reward yourself, and this we don't do enough. So when I was at University of the Pacific doing my doctorate program, it's very difficult, I'll tell you right now. It's a very difficult program. Most people do not finish this program, and it's all writing. Writing. There's no exams, no tests. You spend 5, 6, 7 years writing. And so I would have to write chapters, and because I'm writing a book, your final, I guess, hurdle, if you will, is to write what they call a dissertation or a book. And so I wrote different chapters. And so what I would do is when I could even get like 2 pages of one chapter done, I would say to myself, you have to sit, you're tired, you're exhausted, I know. Sit down. If you can write the 2 pages, you get to reward yourself. And like for me, it would be something like I would get to watch an episode of Blacklist or an episode of some show that I like. Because when I was in school, I just didn't have time for television or for those types of activities because I had a family, I had kids, and I was in school and I was working. And so it took all of my energy. And so I had to reward myself, because if I didn't reward myself, I would get depressed. I would feel like, oh my gosh, I cannot write 20 pages for this chapter. But when I broke it up into many little goals, and then I rewarded myself with something that I wanted or something that was fun for me. And for me, watching an episode of something, my brain could kind of just click off, right? And I didn't have to think about anything. And that's why it was great for me. But reward yourself. That helps you to stay positive. All right. Right. Basically research says there's some real benefits to setting goals. So what we know is that students who learn how to set goals experience more academic success. So looking at these 2 different bar graphs here, what we see is that when we have students who didn't set goals in college, we saw that their GPA or grade point average, it was a little over 2.0. When we looked at students who had set goals on what they wanted to achieve in college, we say that they had a GPA of close to 3.0. So it was a big difference just based on whether or not they set goals. One of the tips that I use for my life is because, and you can see behind me right here, I have a lot of whiteboards in my room, and I have a lot of different boards I have papers on. And the reason is because I have to be organized. So I have one whiteboard that is really kind of like the tasks that need to get done like in the next month. They're big jobs, right? Then I have another board that says really this week. This week, these are the meetings I have. These are the different student assignments I need to grade. This is what's happening. And then I have a daily board which says, this is what you need to do today. Take the meat out of the freezer in the morning so you can cook dinner tonight, right? Small things that stop at the grocery store for this, call the doctor's office to make an appointment for that. Those small things. And this is what works for me because I'm a visual learner. And so for me, seeing things visually helps me to remember them, helps me to do them. And so that's just something that helps me to get my goals accomplished, is by actually having them up where I can see them frequently. All right, so thinking about your goals and career, right? So we're not just talking education here, we're talking about your career. So learning on the job is a big one. So I was an employer. I had many different workers in my office. And one of the things that I loved is when I would have an employee that would come up to me and say something like, oh, are you working on the budgets for this month? Or are you working on the meeting agenda? Can I watch you? Can you show me how to do that? It wasn't part of their job, but they wanted to learn how I did my job. And I feel like that to me said they had motivation, they had desire, and I can do on-the-job training. We're actually helping them to advance their career by setting these goals, right? When you are in a job, you are expected to continue to learn. So don't think that, well, here I am. I work in shipping and receiving and I put packages together and this is what I do. But there's always stepping stones and there's always better ways to improve. And when you bring ideas to your supervisor and those ideas are received well, or those are really great stepping stones in your career advancement, right? So set those goals at your job too. All right, this is our last slide. And here I want to talk about something that is important to me. And this has to do with one of your activities this week. So this week you have multiple activities about goal setting, right? And then of course you have your weekly reflection, but you're also going to have a really, I think, fun activity called social capital. So what is social capital? Social capital is the know-how. So let me give you an example. If you and I come from a low-income family. My grandparents all were migrant workers. They picked in the fields, and we came from a very impoverished family. And so my parents didn't have the know-how because nobody in their family had ever gone to college. Nobody in their family, my grandparents never even passed high school. None of them. Right? One of my grandparents never learned to read and write. And so they had to get social capital. And social capital is how we get information that's helpful to us when we don't have it. So what you're going to do is you're going to read a story about Juan. And you're going to print out or you're going to look online and you're going to see I put the story up there and you're going to read Juan's story. And then you're going to answer some questions. And what I want you to explore is Juan is a boy that lives in what we call somewhat of a homeless situation. He lives doubled up. Doubled up is when you have an apartment or a place where there's 2 or 3 families that live together. And so if this place should have 3 people that live there, there's like 7 people that live there. Right? And that's how he lives. He comes from a very poor family, and Juan wants to go to college. He wants to go to school, yet he doesn't have social capital. He doesn't know how to go to college. And so he needs to have people in his life, or what we call networks of relationships, that provide helpful information. Right? Another example is I always tell my students who take my classes that I am a resource for you, that even after you leave this class, you can contact me if you have a question about a major or a question about a choice you're making. If I can help you in any way, that's what I want to do, because I want students to be successful, not just pass my class, but I care about you being successful in all of your courses. And it's surprising how many students don't take me up on that. Now, I have quite a few that do. I have relationships with students where we still go hang out at, meet somewhere and have some lunch and talk about what's going on. I have students that have gone on to 4-year colleges, and I hear from them down the road and everything. But I can provide some social capital, right? I know, this is what I do. I teach and I'm in higher education. And so I know this stuff. And so if you have a question about that stuff, you need to find people who can give you the know-how. They can give you the social capital. And when we're poor, it's harder for us to find that because we're not exposed to people like that. And so you're going to read one story, and then you're going to answer some questions about social capital. And when all of the students and when all of you have submitted your responses and the due date and has closed, I will come back and we'll talk a little bit more about Juan. He's a real person. So we'll talk about Juan and where he is today and his story. So I hope you have a great week with goal setting, decision making, and learning more about social capital. Until next time.